This reflection is maybe provocative, but it's very sincere and respectful. Our name is Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. Our motto is religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. I'm wondering if the name of our group and our motto are sometimes at odds with each other. Why did our founders put the word justice before the word peace? In my mind, the motto, religious communities must stop blessing war and violence, means we all must condemn war and violence. But what about that word justice? It's not there in our motto. Did ICUJP's founders think we could have peace, the absence of war, the absence of violence? Could we have those and justice at the same time? Or did they put justice first in ICUJP because they thought you can't have real peace until you have justice? How do you balance that desire, that wish for peace? How do you balance that with God's demand for justice, with God's commandment to do justice? Is peace always the number one priority? Were the people of Vietnam and El Salvador and Nicaragua supposed to live out their miserable lives peacefully, passively, non-violently, waiting for their oppressors to grant them justice? Is the rule implied in our motto, the rule against war and violence, is that rule absolute? Some would say yes, justice must wait until those oppressed peoples can achieve it somehow, non-violently. How long must they wait? Martin Luther King wrote from the Birmingham jail, "Justice too long delayed is justice denied." On April 4th, 1967, Dr. King put his life on the line to condemn the evil of the US war against Vietnam. And Dr. King mentioned the National Liberation Front of Vietnam, but he did not condemn the Liberation Front for taking up arms to fight for freedom and justice. If we accept the broad meaning of our motto, to stop waging war and to stop using violence, are we entitled then, am I entitled then, to sit in judgment? Am I entitled to sit in judgment of Tecumseh and Sitting Bull and Geronimo? Can I sit in judgment of John Brown and the Union soldiers in the Civil War, the African Americans who took up arms against white terrorist rule after Reconstruction failed? To sit in judgment of the Russian soldiers and American soldiers who fought the Nazis in World War II? Am I entitled to judge the people's militias in the Donbass in Ukraine, or the soldiers of the Palestinian resistance? What this reflection comes down to is the admission that I'm not a pacifist, but I might still have a place in interfaith communities united for A, justice, and B, peace.
Wow.
The indigenous people of North America faced a European invasion that threatened to annihilate them and almost succeeded. As they were driven farther and farther to the west, Native Americans resisted. Most of the people who invaded and occupied Native lands didn't wear military uniforms, but they were part of a genocidal conquering force. You could call them civilians, but those good, hardworking white frontier wives were troops in an invading army, and their husbands were farmers or businessmen who occupied native lands just trying to make a living for themselves. Native Americans knew that all those brave pioneers were occupiers, backed up by the might of the federal army, the state militias, and ad hoc security forces. It was understandable that the white settlers were seen as legitimate targets in the indigenous people's war of resistance. And those white settler men and women knowingly exposed their children to the deadly crossfire between themselves and native warriors fighting for their people's existence. And my question for myself and for all of us, does the history of the near genocide of Native people in what we call the United States of America, does that history have a parallel with the history of Palestine? Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Dave. It really, you said it.
Thank you, Dave. I hope all of that, including your final remarks, are in writing. If you could share that with us, we'd like to post it as today's reflection. I think you've put your finger on something that we need to explore in future programs with thoughtful people coming to us, including yourself. Thank you so much.
This is one aspect of work that ICUJP has done for off and on for its existence, is not only look at more obvious issues of justice and peace, but also how we, this country and the society deals with the incarcerated. So we wanted to invite people who not only, because of our contact with Death Penalty Focus through Steve and others, talk about this aspect as well, which is life without the possibility of parole. And, you know, the work that Drop LWOP is doing, not only around that issue, but current legislation that's going through and how we as a group can be involved. So Elisa Baier, who is on the screen, is involved with Drop LWOP, which is a coalition working to end life without parole sentencing in California. Also joining us is Joanne Scheer, who founded the Felony Murder Elimination Project, which is involved with Drop LWOP. And she founded it when her only child, Anthony, was convicted of first-degree murder under the felony murder rule and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole under the felony murder special circumstances law. And even though that Anthony did not harm or intend to harm anyone, he was sentenced to die in prison. And catalyzed by this horrific experience, she determined to stop this from happening to another child. So both of these folks have dealt with this issue, and we can be involved in helping change this, at least in California. So Joanne and Elisa, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours. And if everybody else can go on mute, that would be great.
Hi, everybody. We really appreciate talking to you. I know that we're involved with one other presentation a while ago that was a general, what is LWOP? Why is it so horrible in California? The reasons behind it. You know, we've kept in touch. All last fall, we were kind of in communication, and we wanted to wait until we could actually ask this group to help in some really tangible ways. And we're at that point. I really appreciate the amount of work that you did, Rick, to kind of like, it was sort of last minute, and you really thank you so much for putting in so much effort recently. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to, hand it over very quickly to Joanne. Joanne's going to give you some details about SB 94. And then I'm going to explain the help that we really need right now in general. We have plenty of time to have more of like just a conversation. And we're going to talk mostly about SB 94, but for the conversational part, feel free, if you're not too familiar with Life Without Parole in California, you can ask us more broad questions for sure. Joanne, could you explain maybe a little bit more about how you got to this point, and then also the specifics of SB 94 and who it's going to impact, and then I'll go after.
Okay, that sounds good. I just want to say how much I appreciate this group of people. This is really a pleasure to be sitting here with you. There's such a spirit coming from here, so I just want to thank you. I came into this work, I'd never heard of felony murder. I'd never heard of Life Without Parole. I didn't know anything about it until my son got involved in a situation where unfortunately someone lost their life. And felony murder is kind of a net, that is a law that's kind of a net that gathers up all of the people involved in a circumstance and can give them a first-degree felony murder or first-degree murder, even if they did not harm or have any intent to harm anyone. So he was sentenced to the sentence of death in prison. It really is death in prison. People who are serving life without the possibility of parole will never come before the parole board. And so they are left out of every law that is passed, such as the youth offender laws or anybody who's been caught up in domestic violence or sex trafficking or sexual abuse situations. All of those laws will not affect somebody with life without parole. So many of you were very helpful with our bill SB 300 that was done after COVID 21, 22. And that was for a very small part of felony murder, life without parole, that we could change with a 2/3 vote. We made it through all the committees, and it was held in assembly, on the assembly floor, because we didn't have enough votes. So we came back and thought, how can we affect anyone with LWOP without a 2/3 vote in the legislature, which is extremely hard to get. So we came up with SB 94, and what SB 94 is it's authored by Dave Cortese, Senator Dave Cortese, and it's a very simple bill that would affect maybe around 500 people who are serving life without parole. What SB 94 would do, it would provide judicial review for individuals who are serving life without parole, whose sentences or whose offenses occurred before June 5th of 1990, and who have served at least 25 years of their life without parole sentence. So if we think about 1990, that was 33 years ago. So we're talking about people who have been imprisoned for a very, very long period of time, who have never had an opportunity for a judge to review their case, and see how they're and look at the individual and how they what their history is, or how their rehabilitation has gone throughout those 30 years in prison. So what SB 94 would do is that would provide an opportunity for a judge to take a look at their case, to take a look at what they've done while they're in prison, what kind of transformation they've done in their lives, what kind of programs they've accomplished. We've got a great many people who are life without parole who have gained college educations. They facilitate programs. They're mentors to young people coming into prison. They have years and years of disciplinary-free programming. And we really want to give these people an opportunity for a judge to take a look at their case and their history, and take a look at them and see if they would if the judge would grant them any kind of resentencing to a parole eligible sentence. Throughout the years since the 1990s, we've had many laws that have changed. You can now, if someone is accused of murder or attempted murder, and it was due to a domestic violence or sexual abuse, you couldn't bring that into court. That would not be a mitigating factor in your case. Now those laws have changed, and we've got women who are serving life without parole because of domestic violence and domestic abuse. We've got youth offender laws right now. We have laws that have to do with childhood trauma and have to do with trauma from being in the military. And all of those laws that have been passed have not affected someone serving LWOP because they're left out of those. So if SB 94 passes, someone who has done at least 25 years of an LWOP sentence, whose offense occurred before June 5th, 1990, can petition the court and ask a judge to review their case and to take a look at what their last 25 or 30 years have been like in prison. It does not mean that a judge would automatically resentence them. A judge would have complete discretion as to whether to resentence this person to a parole eligible sentence, which if that judge did, then the person would have the opportunity to go before the parole board. The parole board would take a look at the case and all of the factors and their behavior in prison, and either recommend grant the parole or deny the parole. That if they recommended the parole, then that recommendation would go to the governor, and the governor would then be able to grant or deny. So this bill is not a get out of prison. It is not a, yes, you're going to be resentenced. All it is just to have a judge take a look at their case and make a decision as to whether they think this person should be able to go before the parole board and have their case reviewed. We had to take certain amendments to the bill in order to get it to where it is right now. We had to, anyone whose offense involved the death of a peace officer is not included anymore. A person whose offense involved more than 2 homicides is not involved in anybody. Persons with prior or current sex offense convictions are not involved. We've had to take these amendments we've gotten through all of the committees, and we were held on assembly floor last year. We couldn't get enough votes. And so we are back this year to go to the assembly floor where we're trying to get the votes that we couldn't get last year. And we're trying to get those votes in order for it to pass the assembly floor. So Elisa, I'm not sure if I get real long-winded and then I get real passionate and then all the hour's gone. So I will leave it right there for anybody with any questions.
Mhm.
So As you both were speaking on the project, I put links to the Drop LWOP Coalition in the chat, the Felony Murder Elimination Project, as well, and also the letter for SB 94. That is actually a Google Doc that not only is something that I think that this board can maybe take a look at and be involved with, but also those of us that are with constituent organizations can bring this up to those respective board members and people of authority that can make those kind of statements. So please, bookmark that link, and if you can bring that up to another group that you're involved with, that'll help spread the word on it and get some momentum going on it.
Mhm. And I think Steve had his hand up, and then Carol Francis as well.
Yes, she was struggling to find her mute button as facilitator. Thank you so much, Joanne. Two questions. The first is sensitive, and you will answer this as you see fit. Can you tell us the status of your son's case and maybe humanize this whole issue, because you have such a personal stake in this? And then secondly, we have a largely Democratic legislature in California. They exhibit every so often an awareness of the problems with our carceral system and our criminal injustice system. What's the nature of their opposition to this bill, especially after the amendments you've accepted? And how do they articulate their opposition to a bill that I think, even beyond a group like this, a group of average Californians would find very reasonable?
Two really good questions, Rick, or Steve, I'm sorry. So regarding my son, he was 20 years old when this situation occurred. He was a very naive kid. He'd never been in trouble in his life. He's very very outgoing but he was found himself in a situation and peer pressure and kind of went along. He was sentenced, he and two others were, he was 20 years old, and one of the fellow Marines that he was with had been injured in the second tour in Iraq, and ended up throughout this circumstance, lost his temper and ended up killing somebody. Tony was sentenced at 22 to life without parole. Actually, all three of them were sentenced to life without parole. And Tony is now 37. He's been in for 16 years, almost 17 years, almost half of his life. This life without parole is a family issue. I'm serving this sentence. I will be serving this sentence until I die. And he's my only child. His dad died 2 years ago, so I am, he's alone when I'm gone. This bill does not affect him. It will not affect him ever, because he was not charged. His offense did not occur before 1990. SB 300 would have, but it's right. When I think about our situation, I think about the men and women inside who've been in and served 30 years, 30, 35, 40 years, and their families are gone, right? Who's going to fight for them? And they've been in, and actually, felony murder makes up 53% of people serving life without parole. So it's not the worst of the worst. It's not people who are irredeemable. Our laws are just that, our sentencing laws are just too extreme and do not take into account the human aspect and circumstances that we sometimes find ourselves in. As far as legislators, the opposition to this bill is the same opposition that comes out all the time. District attorneys are against it. Law enforcement is against it. Some of the opposition say that this is a blanket bill that everybody's going to be getting out of prison. All these murderers are going to be getting out of prison. It's the rhetoric that is used in the opposition is wrong. It's not factual. There are 3 levels actually 4 levels of this bill that at each level they can stop someone from getting through the parole board. Our parole board in California is very, very good. They aren't granting everything, and they look very, very carefully at anybody who comes before the parole board. So we've got like 3 levels that a person has to go through in order to be released from prison. And those are very, very strong obstacles to get over. So they would have to prove themselves. There's a lot of work that you have to do, but they're just trying to get the opportunity to go before the parole board. Again, the opposition also uses that this is not fair for victims, and because they have to keep coming to court, or they would have to, if these people were granted parole, they would have to go, or they could show up to the parole board, and they've always got a voice. And we're trying very hard to make sure that we've put a piece in our bill that says that victims need to be notified, and they have a right to be there and have a right to speak. But Crime Victims United has come out in a very vocal way to fight back on that and say this is not right for victims. It's not fair. That this is what we've done is promised them closure. And as we all know, there is no closure to trauma. There's no closure to pain. There's no closure to grief. And there are families on both sides, on families and people who have done harm that are remorseful and want to give back to the community and have no opportunity to do that. And those who have been harmed have a voice. They not all victims' rights. CSSJ is very, very. They're one of our supporters, one of our very big supporters, and so not all victims are the same, right? So that's the rhetoric, and that's the opposition that is coming out against it. And so what's happened is we've got moderate Democrats that are either on the fence or saying, no, our constituents would not want this. And we're, of course, trying to get people from their districts and organizations to let them know that actually people do want this. So I hope that answers your question.
It did. And if I can, for a moment, thank you for the first part of your answer. It both breaks my heart, but is such an inspiration. We have people come before us with such a sense of justice, and the idea that you are struggling with this bill, even if it doesn't personally help Tony, is really amazing. And it is individuals like you who care for others that make such a big difference. And we're so proud of you and so grateful that you're here with us today. And thank you. Just a minor footnote, would you define the group CSSJ?
Oh, Californians for Safety and Justice. Oh, Alyssa, Californians for Safety and
That's
Justice. I'm missing an S.
I would have to look it
I
up.
will
Yeah.
look. I'm missing an S, and I miss a
They're a
lot of
great
stuff
group.
at this age, I'm telling you. Yeah,
Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice.
That's it.
Crime
Yeah.
Survivors for Safety and Justice. Thank you, Rick. Yeah.
So as we've been doing, getting a little bit more into legislation, we've learned a lot, and Joanne mentioned it a bit. There's parts of California where, life without parole is massive. It's a massive problem in California. Like, we have one of the worst rates of people who have been sentenced to life without parole, but it's still relatively a small group of people, right? So it's like a little over 5,000 people, and their stories just aren't really known. It's not something people think about that much, and for us to make any changes, we're gonna have to explain how horrible it is to more people throughout California. We've seen that we have a lot of support in certain areas, and then we just don't know people in other areas. And specifically, like around Orange County, the Inland Empire, San Diego area, we just don't know as many people. And there's other areas of California, but I heard a number of you were from Southern California, and that's why I'm mentioning those areas. So I'll talk about like the really specific ways that we could definitely use support and help. And then also I want to talk more generally and more broadly too. So we have the letter of support. So if this group can send a letter of support, that would be amazing. We would be so appreciative. Also, like Rick mentioned, if you are part of another organization, if you lead another organization or a congregation, if you can bring that to your board or your leadership group and have them sign a letter of support, that would be amazing as well. Joanne and other people who are really involved in this legislation can also work with different congregations or different organizations to set up a Zoom staff meeting with different representatives. And Joanne can explain the bill. The constituents probably don't have to do too much talking. They just have to say, like, yep, we're your constituent, we support this bill. And Joanne and other people can support with setting up those meetings and actually leading those meetings. So letters of support, meetings, and then as the vote gets closer, and Joanne probably has a better sense than I do about when this vote might happen, putting out calls to like if you're part of a membership organization, putting out calls to email, call, like just individual constituents, not necessarily as a representative of your organization, but more just like individuals from different districts. In that scenario, I would be happy to help, communicate and give you information and for any newsletter or emails. So those are the very specific things for this bill. And then more broadly, we would love to work with your group just on an ongoing basis. Like I feel like at this point we have developed some relationships with you. I personally would love to just continue to be in communication. about ending life without parole more broadly, generally, and especially in those areas, you know, right around Orange County, right around Riverside, San Bernardino, San Diego, Long Beach, like Fresno, up north, you know, like we would love to just develop relationships, mutually beneficial relationships, you know, like there's other bills out there that we absolutely would support as well. So, you know, individually, if you'd like to just be in contact, and strategize with us, like we would absolutely love that. So that's the sort of broad strokes. And I'll pause and see if anybody has anything they want to talk about related to that. Steve?
Rick was just before me.
Oh, okay, Rick. Oh, sorry. I
No,
couldn't see
that's
the hand.
okay. I should change the color of the hand. It kind of doesn't go with the background there. But no, I think this is very valuable. And you know, we've started to talk about going on congressional visits. One of our board members, Ed Fisher, is very interested in getting that going and reaching out to folks. And we have a little contingent by where I live near Diamond Bar and Pomona, of some folks that we should be going to visit our congressperson pretty soon. I'm curious about what you're thinking on how this is presented to the legislature and how this is presented to maybe voters, even if it does come up for a proposition or something like that. Because when it comes to incarceration reform or policing reform, it seems like there have been instances where we're not cognizant of how the wording can be spun in a very negative manner. I remember what was it? Defund the police. That some small organization in a corner of the the East Coast came up with for a press release on something, and it got blown up out of proportion because the other side knew that they could spin it to mean anarchy and fighting in the streets and dogs and cats living together and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to make sure that there is an idea that the way that this is messaged has to be something that is pretty airtight, and it's almost, you almost have to make it a bullet point thing where people know what's going on. Those bullet points also answer the questions that they have that maybe come out of fear. And and I think there are a couple of organizations that can help. I was talking to online with Anthony, who's involved with American Friends Service Committee, and their Committee on Legislation in California works on incarceration reform as well. Groups, I don't know if you're working with, that can actually not only help in getting the word out, but constructing the wording around the legislation to make it more palatable.
Thank you so much for that. And I will, I do want to talk more with Anthony, just not just for this bill, but in general. But Joanne, can you, because I know Cortese and his staff are on the same page about that. And I think, Joanne, do you want to talk at all about how they
I would
describe it?
love to. I'm sitting here writing this down. American Friends Service Committee. We've worked with them on bills, and they're wonderful, but you know, you just sparked something in me right now. We have such a hard time. So honestly, just even from a personal standpoint, right? When we had SB 300, the last bill that we had, they were so afraid that we were going to win, that Crime Victims United, who was originally created by the Prison Guards Association. Okay, I'm just saying, and they're used a great deal by to kill bills and to do that. But I was because they were so close, we were so close to winning. What they did was they brought out the family that was affected by, in my son's case, and called me a liar and my son a monster, you know, in literally in the Public Safety Committee hearings, and so there's always, from a personal standpoint, there's somebody who's lost their child, but for somebody, it's almost like we have no right to say anything, or to show our remorse for that, or to show our empathy for that. And so we, in legislation, we have a hard time. We are working very hard right now to have the voices of surviving victims, and to create this unity, because we all know hurt people, and there's trauma around all of this. And so we're trying very hard to do that language, so that to bring unity, and to know that healing takes all forms, right? And everybody needs to be healed. So your advice to talk to American Friends Service Committee, that's a wonderful idea, to talk to them about how we struggle with this message, right? Of, we don't want to cause any more harm, but we want to not cause any more harm for these people who caused harm. Everybody changes, everybody transforms, everybody moves forward, everybody, we don't stay in a place of in our worst act as human beings. So thank you very much for that suggestion, and we will definitely reach out to them.
Steve, and then Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to alert the members of the board of directors that before Elisa has to leave at 9 o'clock, I'm convening a special meeting of the board of directors of ICUJP on this screen to take up the letter of support and an action plan to support SB 94 and the entire LWOP campaign. To do that officially, we've done that in different ways over the years. What I did want to do, because we have a few more minutes, the benefit of our programs is this does not have to be a quick soundbite discussion. We have the time to dig deep into these issues, especially with guests like we have today. I just put in the chat an article I wrote that was published in the LA Progressive and elsewhere on the entire question of ending LWOP, seen from an international perspective. The United States is such an outlier in so many respects when it comes to our carceral system, but in particular when it comes to this issue of LWOP. We are in league with, and this is true of the death penalty itself, we are in league with countries that perpetuate this kind of injustice. So I'm offering that article and hope people will grab it and read it and use it in the campaign and elsewhere, because when I sat down to look at the international setting, that evidence and the criminologists and people who care about public safety, I think what comes across in what Joanne and Elisa are saying is proponents of ending LWOP are not reckless citizens. They do not. They are not oblivious to the desire for public safety. It's just, how do you arrive at that in a smart and humane way? And that's what this bill evidences. So I think we have to approach it in that light. I want to tell this group that death penalty focus had to struggle with LWOP. There are many people who believe that the way we end the death penalty is to broadcast and lift up, under current law, the availability of LWOP. It's a nice rhetorical argument. Oh no, let's end the death penalty, but because those monsters will be put away for the rest of their lives. And historical strategic position that death penalty focus took in the last two initiatives. When we tried to abolish the death penalty twice in going to the voters of California, and we lost only by a few percentage points in each of those initiatives. And we were told by political consultants, by pollsters, that each of those bills had to include LWOP. But we've changed our mind. And after a deep examination of LWOP, our board of directors has voted to oppose LWOP and to support laws like SB 300 and SB 94. And we are working to strategize with all of our coalitional partners in advancing that position. Fundamentally, there are certain issues in which justice prevails over tactics, where justice prevails over strategy. We believe that with the help of the wonderful people you're seeing here today and their organizations, that we can convince 50% plus one of Californians that we can both abolish the death penalty and reform LWOP in the way that this bill does. So I think it's very important that is a measure of how these wonderful advocates have moved the needle, even within the progressive community. And I wanted to be clear about that and offer my article to the group. And then in a few minutes, we'll come back around to what our board can do about this. Thanks.
There you go.
I just want to thank you all for bringing up this bill SB 94, and I will bring it to the attention of Friends Committee on Legislation of California. They do a lot around prison issues, prison reform. In fact, they're supporting universal clemency for people who are have the death penalty. So this is an issue that's very near and dear to the heart of Quakers. I just want to take a little moment for a religious reflection, because as a person of faith, I believe in redemption. I believe that there's no one who is incapable of being rehabilitated and redeemed. And I was thinking this morning about Moses. You know, he committed an impulsive murder and had to flee Egypt. And yet he went on to become a liberator of his people, and he's held up as a great example. King David also committed murder indirectly. And so, you know, and then we have the story of the two thieves who were with Jesus on the cross. And one of them was redeemed just because of his humility and saying, I deserve to be here. You don't. So I think that if we're truly people of faith, we believe that no one is beyond redemption. And that's why this law is so important, that it confirms that each one of us has the potential to change. Tookie Williams, he was executed, but he was really a force for good because he had turned his heart around and became an advocate for people getting out of gangs because of his own experience. So I really strongly support the bill, and I hope that I'm sure that our organization will support it as well. So thank you for coming to us and bringing it to our attention.
Joanne, your hand is up.
It is. I just thank you very, very much for everything that you both have said. When we were talking about legislation and having those meetings, I just wanted to let you know that we have people who were formally sentenced to LWOP who have been commuted that are in those legislative meetings. They literally, one person in particular, her name is Susan Bustamante. She did 31 years of a life without parole sentence, 31 years. And this SB 94 would have affected her if she hadn't been commuted by the governor. She went in for a murder that she did not commit, and she had 2 children. And those children were in their 30s when she came out. And she literally, I would set up meetings, and she was joining me anywhere from 3 to 5 legislative meetings a day when we were going through SB 300. She gives that same kind of support, and so do many of our former LWOPs that are out give that kind of support, so that what they're doing is they're showing these legislators who people serving life without parole are. And they're out giving back to their communities, and they're out spending their time trying to help the people that are still behind, right? Susan was in for 30 years. That was her family. I mean, when you think about spending 30 years with the same people, she's out, they're still in there, and she's fighting with all of her heart to help those people that have been left behind. And these are real people who are, who deserve a chance, the same chance that she got. And some people, if they're given the opportunity, will make it through the board, and some will not. But that's how our system is set up. Those are the things that we have to jump through. So if you'll just allow me just very quickly to give you the statistics of who is serving LWOP in California. 62% of our people serving LWOP were convicted under the age of 25. And for all of us who know the brain science, our brains are not fully formed until we're 25, 26 years old. But 61% or 62% of those people serving LWOP were under the age of 25 at the time of the offense. 71% of them, it was a first-time offense. So they've never had prior history of being in trouble. 71% of those. 68% of people serving life without parole are people of color. This is it's an extremely racist law, and it is used across the board to incarcerate youth and people of color, and our women who've been sexually and physically harmed through domestic violence and sexual abuse. So there is no level of crime that pushes you up to a life without parole sentence. 95% of our first degree of our murder laws can be given a special circumstance. It is solely at the discretion of a prosecutor. And judges after 1990 do not have the discretion to lift a special circumstance once a prosecutor has charged it and once somebody is convicted of it. So that's why we're kept to before 1990, the judge had that discretion. So I just wanted to give you an overview of really who is inside serving these sentences, and it just to give you a broader sense of who these people are. So thank you for giving me that platform.
I as a 75-year-old, I think back on when I was 55 and think of what if all those things that I cherish, all those memories that I cherish in those last 20 years had not been possible.
Okay, what I was wanting to know about the situation of your son, Joanne, I so relate because, you know, I have a son who didn't mature until he was in his 40s. So and he has been arrested, and it was a very traumatic experience for him. But I'm wondering, in this long-term imprisonment that he has, are there any programs that give him solace, that provide support for him, that you think might be things that we would be interested in finding out about and supporting? I just know about Alternatives for Violence, that program that they go into prisons and get groups going, and there's some support that way. And I know that the 12-step programs do go into prisons and seek to help with transformation. But I'm just wondering, from your standpoint of what he's gone through, where has he found his support and safety?
It's not through any program in CCR, unfortunately. He's a very strong Christian, and he's actually 2 classes away from getting his certificate of ministry. He's grabbed hold of God, and that doesn't keep you from despair. I don't know. We all know that our life situations, we know that God is there. Sometimes we can't find him when we're in a pit of despair and can't see the light, but God has pulled him out of every single one of those. It's very hard to get God in prison, I've found. Twice now for his course work, it gets sent in and gets lost in the mail. He never gets them, so I'm having to buy them again. And but some of the programs that he have been helpful are Celebrate Recovery. That's the NA and AA classes are very helpful. Some classes, LWOPs, they can sign up for, but many times they don't get to be in because they have no chance at parole. So the people who are parole eligible get those places. But he has gone through that. Kairos came in for a weekend and was absolutely the most wonderful thing. But that happened one time, and it doesn't happen in all the prisons. So the Celebrate Recovery he really likes. There's another one that he's going through right now that has been helpful. But you know, anything that has to do with lifting you up spiritually is what has helped him do this. And he actually has written a program, and there was a book called Experiencing God that was written by Blackaby. I can't remember the guy's first name, but it was long time ago, and he's read that and done that workbook probably 4 times throughout the 16 years, and he wants to start a group that is doing that Experiencing God workbook because it's been so vital to him. But I wish that CDCR would have more LWOP specific groups, because it's one thing to be inside and have a parole eligible sentence. It's another thing to actually know that you will never, ever, ever go before the parole board. You have no chance. So that's a very big difference. And they're watching people get out through the parole board, knowing that they'll never have a chance. There's a despair there that can't even be put into words. And the people who this bill will help this is a lifeline for them. And it's very frustrating to not be able to get a legislator to, you don't even have to go out on a limb, because all this is just a chance for them to go before a judge and say, please look at what I've done. Please look at how remorseful I am. So this isn't even I get so frustrated with the legislators because we're people. Whoever gets out is going to be my next door neighbor too, and that's where we're coming from. So, but to your point, there are good programs inside that that do help a lot, and the recovery programs are mostly what those are about. And also the college courses that they're allowed to take are wonderful. We've got people who didn't even make it through high school, that they're getting their GED and now they're going on to college. So it's we all want to be productive, and that's how God made us. And so when we stymie that, we stymie growth, and we stymie creativity, and we keep, if we could embrace the incredible creativity and empathy that is behind our bars, I think that our society would be a greater society.
Also, speaking to what Joanne was saying, so the Drop LWOP Coalition started because groups of women, came together within the prisons, and through their Life Without Parole groups, conveyed to CCWP, please tell our story. And then Families United, to eliminate life without parole, also joined CCWP and Felony Murder Project to create the coalition. And what we're seeing right now, as far as support groups, is sort of an organic. A lot of the people that have life without parole right now are coming together on their own to create groups. And the Drop LWOP Coalition, like, we have a group of people on the outside that are trying to support that. That's kind of like an effort in progress. We definitely need help with that, because it's hard to communicate with 5,000 people. So that's kind of like, if somebody is more inclined to help in a very serving way, in a direct communication way, that opportunity is there. Families United to End LWOP is also doing the same thing. They are from the outside supporting, naturally, organically forming life without parole groups in each prison, to the point that there's a group of men who are actually organizing a walkathon as people who have life without parole to raise funds for the outside, right? Like, these are people who want to give back so badly that they're doing a fundraiser inside prison, even though they only earn, like, barely anything, cents an hour for their labor. And they are trying to raise funds for people on the outside. So, it's related to people with LWOP trying to find some solace, even though they have the sentence.
So I'm convening a special meeting of the Board of Directors. I will invite a motion for ICUJP to officially endorse SB 94, to sign the letter of support, and to actively work for its passage.
So
I have-
moved.
Carol Francis, do I have a second? I saw Anthony. We've had a full discussion and we'll have some more discussion, but all in favor of that motion on the board, say aye or indicate your vote.
Aye.
Dave
Aye.
Clennan's
I'm not on board.
there. Any, take your hands down. Any no votes? Any abstentions? Well, great. This is just a formal way of doing what we believe in and have believed in for many years. Rick, if you would format the letter of support for ICUJP offline, you and I will work on signing that and submitting it. I think Joanne and Elisa, you've learned that we are an activist organization. We don't just contemplate our navels or our scriptures in a passive way. So offline, we're going to work closely and directly with you. We're used to organizing and participating in legislative visits. We're used to promoting events. I have it in my mind to create a more public webinar on this. We've done those in the past. Sometimes we've had what we call justice luncheons, where we've gone to a congregation. We've brought speakers together and others to reach out, to go into communities, not expect them to come to us, but for us to go to them. This is a very important issue for us. And we're grateful for your input today. I'll pause there. I have a few other comments later if we have time, but I also wanted to hear from Rose if she's still there.
Rose, are you still there? You didn't leave
Yes,
us.
I'm still here. I kind of put my hand down because I thought what I was going to say wasn't very good. Still. No, Joanne, I just want to really reach out to you. I have a close friend whose son got involved in some adolescent pranks. That's all I can call it. When he was just at the end of high school, he didn't get the most severe sentence that your son got, but still he was inside for 14 years from the age of 18. And now he's been out about a year, and I'm just watching, you know, his struggles. I mean, all the opportunities he's lost in life, and it's just horrendous. And so I just wanted to say, I just really admire your strength and the fact that you're using your energy and your strength to fight for this crazy, crazy law. I mean, when you came out with those statistics of the numbers and the percentages of people, I mean, it's just wrong. But then the number of people in prison in California is also just wrong. I mean, you know, I don't know where you even start. Just to segue slightly, I work kind of with quite a large homeless a homeless population. And I know several people who have served one case 28 years. And they come out and they're on the streets because they don't have a family background. Everybody's died while they were inside. Anyway, enough of my ranting. It wasn't really relevant, but thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Rose, so much. I so appreciate it.
I wanted to say, like what Rose was talking about, the general level of incarceration of this country. I just heard on a podcast that I listen to frequently with Brian Becker that his guest was saying that President Biden brags that one of his greatest contributions was getting this anti-crime bill supposedly through. And at that point, because of this anti-crime bill, the number of people incarcerated almost doubled in a few years. It's like, and it didn't make us any safer. It just, you know. Rebecca?
Hi, I just wanted to say real fast, I really appreciate everybody's work here. I looked up the bill and I saw it was the usual suspects. I lobby with animal welfare advocates in the legislature, And so I'm familiar with these dynamics because we go up against the animal control lobby, which is essentially a police lobby. They're law enforcement. And so they're a police lobby. And usually you have like Portantino, who will be very supportive. And then I see on the Senate floor here, he didn't show up. He was a abstention. They get cold feet. They don't want to go up against the district attorneys. And I see some Orange County voices missing here too in the vote. I was encouraged though in the legislative history. I saw that Senator Hayden, who is one of my heroes, tried to bring a similar bill back in 1999, and it failed. But I just want to put out there to everybody the dynamics right now in the legislature with Newsom's recall is that it seems the GOP is trying to elevate Bill Estley, who is a big pro police voice. He was freshman last year, assembly member, and he was a hit at CPAC. And now they are talking about the GOP is putting him up for governor in the recall. Very pro police and very influential. But I do have he did sponsor some animal welfare legislation, so I do have his ear with my colleague Nathan Winograd, who was one of Senator Hayden's former legislative aide. So I'm happy to support this bill. And I see there's a huge contingency of support for this bill, and there's very few parties that are opposing it, but they're very powerful. That's it. Oh, and I have connections into Orange County to Orange County progressives through my aunt, OC Huddle. So I'm happy to put everybody in touch.
Yeah, I think what I've noticed about this issue is that there's a recidivism rate is very, very low for these kind of crimes. But whenever someone is released from prison who's been convicted of a violent crime and they reoffend, it often gets front page news. And then it becomes a political issue. No politician wants to take responsibility for any of these, reoffenders. So the best way to succeed politically in this country is just to keep piling on more and more sentences, regardless of any kind of research about the effectiveness of that approach. So that's what we're up against. And the other thing that I'm aware of is that in the work I do, which is mostly focused on people experiencing homelessness, there's tremendous prejudice towards unhoused people. When affordable housing is proposed in an area like San Dimas, there were 3,000 people who signed a petition against it, and they were crying, "We have to do this to protect our children," as if elderly people who had been homeless, this was a project for elderly homeless people over 55, were going to somehow be a threat to their children. So we have to struggle with that kind of prejudice in the work I do. And the one way we do help to dispel stereotypes is by having people who've been homeless share their stories about how their lives have been changed now that they're housed. And I'm wondering how much of that work, how much of, do we call that, people with lived experience. And they're often the most effective advocates for affordable housing. Do you engage people who've been released from prison after long sentences and have done well? Are they able to advocate effectively for your cause?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna put something in the chat after I finish speaking. Human Rights Watch actually just put out this amazing kind of survey of all the people who had juvenile life without parole. The laws have changed, and a lot of those people are living their lives and thriving, want to give back, and so I'll put that in, and then the Human Rights Watch also has a national Life Without Parole Leadership Council, and they are ready to speak. We are also trying to, without, I think sharing stories can kind of be tricky sometimes, because some people, Joanne can speak to this, it's like you're trying to share your story from prison, but there's a risk involved with that, a legal risk involved with that, and jeopardizing potential avenues to have your sentence changed. So I think, the people who have had their sentence commuted and have been paroled are they are able to speak out, and that is being actively worked on every day by a large number of people. Joanne, do you want to say anything to that? And I'll find the report.
Yeah, that's very true. And actually, the Human Rights Watch, the National LWOP Leadership Council, went to the UN, and the UN put out a memorandum to the United States about LWOP and about how it is inhumane, and how we need to stop it. So I don't know if you've got that too, Elisa. Maybe you could put that out too. But yeah, many times if we'll have somebody who is inside, and they're more than willing to share their stories, but in just even our own personal what happened with SB 300, it has hurt us. We've gone back to court for we made a small change to the felony murder rule with SB 1437, Skinner's 1437, back in 2019, and Tony was able to go back to court and have an evidentiary hearing. But because of the backlash that we're out and talking about his case, and we're out talking, trying to change a law, that has hurt us, and it has actually come into the courtroom in a prejudicial way, behind the district attorney and the actual judges. So you run a really extreme risk of doing that, but which is why it's so we're so blessed to have these people who have gotten out of prison and have served years of an LWOP sentence, and they are front and center in talking about their lives, and they're front and center in talking about what they've done and the remorse that they feel and how they feel compelled to give back. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The LWOP community is beautiful. It's a beautiful community filled with empathetic and strong people who've survived terrible things. Prison is not an easy road. So without our LWOP community, and so blessed that the governor has commuted, that Governor Brown did what he did. I don't think that we would be as far as we are right now. I don't think that we would be able to have the voices that we have right now. So
I just clicked on your link that you just put in about the UN Human Rights Committee, and I noticed it's on a CCR website, which love the Committee for Constitutional Rights. Steve, your hand's up again.
Yes, turning this into an organizing committee, Joanne and Elisa, do you think, are there some success stories where people could speak about how they've transformed their lives. I guess the only category right now are people who've been commuted. I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, people with LWOP have yet to have the right to a parole hearing. Is that right? So you only have a small cohort of people who could be examples of having been released and led productive lives. Let me pause there to be sure that's accurate.
I think probably maybe about 200 people, right? Were sentenced to LWOP, and then via different channels, their sentence was changed. So if you have LWOP, you're not going to parole board. If your sentence was changed, then there's a possibility to. And I think, Joanne, you have more knowledge about this, but the laws changed around juvenile life without parole. So you have a lot of people that did have life without parole who were sentenced before they were 18, who have been released, right? So that's a success story. And that's what the Human Rights Watch report focused on. And then there were people who also have been able to have their sentence changed because of the small change that happened with SB 1437, right? And that was related to felony murder.
Right.
Yeah.
So we may be able to, we've done these webinars not at 7:30 a.m. We've done some with George Gascon and others. We had a series on that. So I'm just working my mind here and offering thoughts for Rick to keep in mind that if you could help us reach out to some of those 200 people, somebody from Human Rights Watch, yourselves, this is one of those cases where I think the more information the public gets, the better. And then each of those people can become a member of a delegation or speaking to their elected officials. It is so cruel that with LWOP, the system writes off these people, denies them programs that would lift up their lives and transform their lives because they'll never get out. I mean, it is such a cruel, vicious cycle. I was proud to be on Stanley Tukey Williams' clemency team, and we sought and fought for clemency. What better example? And we were appealing to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who changed the name of the Department of Corrections to Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And essentially he changed the name and did very little else to lift up rehabilitation, which at its highest order is what any kind of incarceration should be about. So I think his story should have been told. What a resource. I think Rick already mentioned this. A man who was reaching back out, writing books, talking to young gang members to turn their life around as he had turned around his, always denying his guilt for the capital crimes he was convicted of. And we lost him to execution. 1437, for everybody's benefit, is a very important statute. I told everybody last Friday that I was going to San Quentin to see my good friend Bill Clark, who is on death row. Maybe I'll save this for a reflection. It was an extraordinary meeting. I got to hug him. We talked for 2 hours. about our families and our friendship over the last 23 years. And he has a good lawyer familiar with 1437. For everybody's benefit, it allows people on death row to apply for a finding that they were not the active shooter, if you will, in a crime, and that they did not have a substantial role, and there's no evidence that they were reckless toward human life. And there is a serious chance Bill denies the crimes to begin with, but then you are sentenced to a lesser crime, and with time served, you can be released based on that time served. But it was so extraordinary for me because Bill is an artist. And I don't know if I shared with the audience that he creates these political cartoons. This is the men on death row, the proportion of which are innocent. And the caption is "Death Row, packed in its own hypocrisy, 100% racist and dehumanizing, produced by Revenge Inc." And he's just an amazing artist on the kind of productive things that are going on in prison, with all the examples you've given today. How much we are losing as a society for these decent, productive people, whether if they are innocent and if they are guilty of the worst moment in their lives. I think Joanne was alluding to that notion. We judge people by the worst moment in their lives, assuming they were involved in criminal activity, and mark them and stigmatize them for the rest of their lives. That's what's inhumane about this system. And as a society, we can still be safe and have the benefit of those lives out in the free world, adding to a worthwhile society. So I'm very hopeful that we can work together on this.
I'm in the coalition myself, and I came to this work after spending about 8 years working in a couple of men's prisons, volunteering in some college and theater programs. And what Steve just said was one of the profound impacts that had on my life. I believe this experience, which I started doing once I had retired, has been more impactful on my life than almost anything I've done. And I am 76. What hit me is exactly what you said: the talent, the compassion, the beauty and intelligence of the mature men that I met over these years. It was so distressing every time we had to leave after our program was over, to think of what they could be contributing on the outside. And fortunately, I have stayed in touch with a number of men who were, in several cases, they were lifers, but with parole. And every single one, to a person, is out there contributing politically, socially, psychically, to others. I've written a number of support letters as people go to the parole board. And what I always say is, I know personally I will be safer when these people are walking among us. These are the people who are going to reach. And as you said, Steve, they reach out from within. Several of them have written. A man I'm in touch with, he's been in for over 50 years. He was convicted at 1978. And he's putting out music and poetry. He's written 2 books. He's got people on the outside keeping a website for him. He's just one example. He's perhaps a more extreme example, but there are so many that they are reaching out to the young people in the juvenile detention centers. There's a wonderful project called The Beat Within, where they write back and forth, those who are inside. And it is all about making amends, because imagine having to live with the guilt. You know, we don't look at the ones whose lives were affected by the fact that they were involved in some trauma. They were young people. They had very few possibilities. Perhaps they got, sucked into the gang life. And now they are mature individuals. I could never put together that the people I was meeting had actually committed, because some of them I never asked, but if they wanted to, they often did want to tell you why they were in. And so this is the kind of person in so many instances. Now, not all, I agree. There certainly are limits. And there are people who are going to take a lot longer to be rehabilitated. And again, these people were fortunate. They were at San Quentin, which is really regarded within the system as Hollywood, Beverly Hills, because it has so many programs because of the volunteers that come over there. But I've just been very moved by this, and I am thrilled. I work with Elisa and Joanne, and I just really wanted to let you know what it was that brought me here, and just reaffirm what so many of you have been stating, and certainly what Joanne has worked tirelessly for, and the heartbreak of the families. I mean, I could go on, as you can probably notice, so I'm going to stop. But just know that there is so much human worth that has been cut off from us, and it's our loss.
Because I have a son that's incarcerated for 25 years, but I didn't, until I found the LWOP thing, I was just the person that didn't have any help, didn't know anything. But so I'm learning, and I have the family and all that in mind. So thank you, and I'm glad that you're doing action, because so many times I've been promised something, and then they just don't include him. But at this time, someone said their child was there half of life. Mine's been there over half his life, but he's not in the ones that get to have the programs. So and I finally got to see him after 4 years of not being able to even get there, and one time only thing. But I mean, it's really, really hard. So I'm glad that you're saying all these things. And I always say, without hope, you have nothing. So thank you for letting me come. And sorry, because I have a broken leg and lost my sight that I can't see to turn on the thing. So I kept asking the doctor, come on, show me how to do this. They at least put my name on. Usually it just says owner's iPhone. But thank you. Take care. Now, how do I hang up? Okay.
Thank you. All right. Do either of our 2 guests want to say anything in closing? It's now 9:24. Any last words?
I just put my email in it's Drop LWOP Outreach. And I really, truly would love, I'll talk to Rick, and I would love to connect with people individually who are in different areas of Southern California. So thank you so much for inviting us.
And I'd like to echo that. Thank you so much, you guys. What a beautiful group you are, and it's been such a pleasure just to sit in your presence. So thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for all the work that you do.